Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us here on Nationwide at 5. I'm Cliff Hughes.
Well, good afternoon to you listeners on our 90 FM band and, of course, our viewers on YouTube. I'm Tyrone Reid. Good afternoon to you, Sir Cliff.
Good afternoon, Tyrone. How are you doing?
Not too shabby. This kind of feels like the old days.
Yes.
Good to be on with you, Sir Cliff.
Good. And that word, old days. Yes. Let me draw on that for what we call in the trade a segue, because the Special Select Committee of the Senate tasked with crafting an elderly care and protection law has tabled its report. The private member's motion was brought forward by Opposition Senator Professor Floyd Morris.
After months of in-depth deliberations, listeners and viewers, and consultations as well, the report was tabled on Friday, marking the conclusion of the committee's examinations. The proposed act is aimed at safeguarding the rights of older persons in Jamaica.
Well, the proposed law, as you say, is aimed at that, but it follows a series of 16 meetings beginning December 2024. Several stakeholders made submissions, including the National Council for Senior Citizens, the Caribbean Community of Retired Persons, and the Ministry of Health and Wellness. The report includes recommendations that the rights of older persons be enshrined in law.
A significant point there. It also recommends the Office of an Elder Care Advocate to be established to intervene in matters affecting older persons. And of course, listeners and viewers, you might recall that we have the Office of a Children's Advocate mirroring that office there. A definition for elder abuse to include physical, sexual, emotional, and financial abuse, as well as abandonment, is also being proposed. Now, the report similarly calls for a tribunal to be established with the power to adjudicate in matters of breaches of the proposed act.
And Tyrone, it says also that it is strongly recommending that people like you and I should be referred to as older persons. Yeah? Going forward, older persons. We're not to be abused, yeah, by saying, go away, owl. Yeah? Know that
older persons.
But older persons. And that there should be a national education, public awareness campaign to get Jamaicans to drop the ageism that we have indulged in for far too long. You hear that, Bogues? Okay.
And culturally, hopefully, when we get to our guest, it's one of the things we'll try to put to her. How do we get that cultural shift, Sir Cliff? That's going to be significant. The passage of the law won't accomplish that. We will have to do some heavy lifting outside of Parliament.
Exactly. And we are being joined now by the chair of the committee, Senator Shireen Golding Campbell. Good afternoon, Senator.
Top of the afternoon to you, Senator. Welcome.
And good afternoon to you, Tyrone. So if I saw what you did there, I don't even think Tyrone caught it. You just included him.
Yes, I did.
I'm not fighting it. I accept the designation.
Well, let us start there, because I think it marks a key appreciation of part of the problems we have had in Jamaica, where this business of aging is concerned, where we denigrate the old, the elderly, and with it, we also abuse them physically, emotionally, and otherwise, don't we?
Yes. Certainly, Cliff, that's one of the things that came to us in the submissions that were delivered to the committee. We were given an awareness of not just the types of abuse that are meted out to older persons, but some semblance of the level. But bear in mind that those figures, the figures that we were given and the figures that were quoted, are probably woefully underreported figures, because abuse is not something older persons tend to report. So it's a bit like the issue of child abuse and sexual offences in relation to children. I recall in 2008 when that bill was being passed, that one of the concerns we had was whether or not people would actually report these cases to the authorities. And that's the same phenomenon that I think we have to confront with older persons.
Yeah. It's 20 minutes to 6 o'clock. We're speaking with Senator Shireen Goulding Campbell, the committee chair of the Special Select Committee, to craft what they're calling a comprehensive law on the elderly and the aging population in Jamaica in several respects. Let's go to the recommendations, Senator Goulding. And the first one, you begin with financial inclusion and economic empowerment. What's a major recommendation there?
Steve, I know you want to take me to the recommendations, but can I make one comment about the process before you take me into the substance of
Sure.
what we have delivered?
Sure, go ahead.
Because this committee began in December of 2024, and we wrapped up on Friday. We actually we had a meeting to approve the report. And what we have delivered as a committee is not just the ordinary parliamentary committee report that lays out the recommendations and gives you some amount of detail and information about our deliberations. But we've actually also tabled what we have called in the committee a roadmap document, a document that will allow the work of this committee to be taken to the next step, so that rather than have to reinvent the wheel in another place, any gaps that are there can be quickly filled and drafting instructions can be prepared, because the bulk of the work, the research, the inquiry has been done. And I want to make that point because it speaks to the efficiency of the system and how we serve the people in terms of, having different segments of government sometimes reinvent the wheel. So having said that, the committee received a number of recommendations in relation to financial inclusion, and one of those was the question of how our older persons are treated by the banking system, and it was things as basic as provision of facilities for older persons when they go into banks. For many of them, we were told it's a social outing almost. And they go there and they're there for quite some time. So recommendations dealing with financial abuse and being taken advantage of by caregivers and family members and persons in the community who they entrusted to assist them to manage their affairs. So there were a number of testimonies about older persons who had property, and because they trusted the wrong person, it could be a family member, it could not be a family member, somehow or other documents were produced, signatures, they signed documents, maybe not knowing what they were signing, and they were divested of their property. The funds from their accounts were fleeced, things like that. And they often have no recourse, and they often don't tell anybody.
The report from the Special Select Committee of the Senate on crafting a comprehensive law to take care of our elderly. And some of the statistics in the report, 13.9%, almost 14% of the Jamaican population will be sooner rather than later be described as older persons. Based on the 2021 Economic and Social Survey, 13.9% of the population was 60 years and older, with women representing the majority, 52.5%. The 2011 population census recorded 306,401 persons aged 60 and above, while more recent projections from the Mona Aging and Wellness Center place the current estimate closer to 400,000, with a projected increase to 500,000 in the near future. The fastest growing segment are those aged 80 and over. Tyrone.
An aging population, and the data definitely demonstrates that, which really makes the point, Sir Cliff and Senator Golding Campbell, that we need to change the cultural approach to how we treat with our elderly. How do we? The legislation is a good foundation, a good framework to do that. But what else will be needed after the passage of this legislation? As a legislator, have you given much thought to that as yet?
That is a concept, an issue that I grapple with all the time. And it's not just in relation to older persons, but, you know, when you move about the society, when you see how we respond to each other, when you see the things that we speak from our own mouth into the public domain sometimes, you wonder if we don't need a whole comprehensive public education campaign that takes us back to some of the principles and the values that certainly in my grandparents' generation, I think, is a generation I can think that most demonstrated those kinds of principles and values. You know, this is you're right, not just a legislative approach. It has to be a comprehensive approach dealing with not just law, but also sensitizing persons to how you deal with older persons. How do we provide for them in the society? What are the accommodations we make for older persons, many of whom may have physical disabilities or even mental disabilities? It's a problem that I don't have an answer to, is really the short answer. But we start with at least a law that recognizes their importance, that recognizes their contribution, and that recognizes that even while they are aging, they are still valuable members of the society and they're still able to contribute. We've asked earlier about financial inclusion, and that's one of the areas that that you can make practical steps towards including them in the society.
Cliff, if you'd allow me just this follow-up. One of the reasons I was asking the question, Madam Senator, is so we very often wait until the end of the process, then we start to sensitize individuals in terms of the public education campaign to change minds and to change thinking. But as we are working on this, shouldn't that effort get underway even as we're working on the legislative process? And once that is finalized and the bill is passed, then we can tweak an already running campaign to say, look, this is what the new law says going forward. Shouldn't it accompany what we're attempting to do now?
And usually I think that is how it happens, because remember, most of the time these kinds of policy initiatives come from the ministry responsible, and they may produce a green paper or white paper or a bill that they then send to the parliament. This process came out of a private member's motion tabled by Senator Floyd Morris, and so it didn't come from the arm of government that deals with policy. But of course, policy is something that we had to consider in crafting what was the scope and the magnitude of the legislation, what was the appropriate scope and magnitude of the legislation. In fact, we had discussed in committee having town hall meetings to hear from the older persons in various communities more directly, as opposed to hearing through representative bodies. But unfortunately, time did not allow, and with the season impending, one of the things as chair I wanted to ensure was that we delivered a report that could be used, that is useful, and that all the work didn't go for naught, because of course if Parliament were to dissolve and we had produced nothing, that really would be the end of the committee, and it would be a shame for all the amount of time and work that was put into it.
Senator, the issue
Yes,
of that public awareness and rights education, reading from your report, it speaks of a national education campaign, yes, to combat the ageism that we've been talking about. And it is also recommended, quote, that the government pursue a coordinated, multi-channel public awareness initiative aimed at educating the general population on recognizing and reporting abuse of older persons, the importance of intergenerational respect, and the evolving role of older persons in modern society. This initiative should also include targeted professional development for public servants who interact regularly with older persons such as healthcare providers, law enforcement officers, and social workers. This is pretty much on target in specifying what needs to be done in that campaign.
Yes. Yeah, which is what I said, Cliff. I mean, we heard submissions from experts. We heard from Prof. Eldemaya Shera at Mona Aging and Wellness, people like Ms. Sandra Latibodere, who have been studying and producing academic documents in this area for a long time. You know, we also heard from the ministries and departments who deal with issues that touch and concern older persons. So it's pretty comprehensive, the information we got. We were also very well supported by the Legal Reform Department that did a lot of background research for us. So the information is here. And bear in mind, you know, this committee didn't start this work. People like Prof. Shera have been working in this area for decades, have been representing Jamaicans at international conferences and international bodies for a long, long time. So that this has come now is really long after a lot of work has already put in.
Yes.
So to that end, what we really did as a committee was to sit through it and collate it, and then to look at it and say, okay, are there any gaps that we should be including, given this is now 2025? And we did that and produced what we, like I said, consider the roadmap.
Just allow me here, Tyrone. One other recommendation that I found very, very thoughtful. Yes.
Are you looking at the parliamentary committee report now, or the roadmap document?
I'm looking at roadmap for legislation and the care, protection, and inclusion.
Right.
And it says here on page 33. Many of the older persons reside in homes that are physically unsuitable for aging. They often lack basic safety adaptations. As a matter of national policy, the government may consider among its social housing projects a home retrofitting program to subsidize structural modifications such as grab bars, ramps, widened doorways, and non-slip flooring to non-contributors of the NHT. By promoting safe and accessible living environments, this measure would significantly support older persons' right to age with their dignity in their own homes. Such a policy would also lessen the pressure on long-term care institutions and the public health system. Excellent
Absolutely
idea.
Excellent suggestion there. Yes.
Yeah.
And one of the things with that clip was that what we discovered was that, you know, we were told that the NHT has provisions for people who have been contributors. But for those who have not been contributors, they don't have any pathway to accessing these kinds of funds. And quite often, all they have is the asset, their home. And so in that discussion, too, came the discussion about reverse mortgages and how older persons could extract from the value of their home funding to take them through to their end of life period, and still live in their home. And we were told, in fact, that one of the banks, I think it was Jamaica National, had such a program some time ago, but that it was discontinued.
Good.
On page 35, and we're quickly running out of time, Madam Senator, looking at the section dealing with the proposed scope of the bill, it says the legislation for the care and protection of older persons should apply to a broad array of individuals, services, and institutional arrangements that affect the lives and well-being of persons aged 60 and over. And it says the bill should, and if I could jump down to about point 3, apply to care facilities, day centers, nursing homes, assisted living institutions, and long-term care arrangements. Regulate both registered and unregistered caregivers, including family members, private providers, and contracted service professionals. Very, very, very critical. The glare of public scrutiny is not always inside these care facilities, so a lot of abuse goes on undetected. In my earlier,
there's a problem, Tyrone, because much of the care facilities, in fact, the vast majority of them, are not registered under the Nursing Homes Registration Act. So, those that are registered, that are known to the Ministry of Health, who monitors it, is something in the region of, I think, about 30 or 40 of them. And there are more than 100 more across the island that are not registered. But if I know you're wrapping up, guys.
Yes.
But if I were to say, what are the 5 things that really are the big ticket items in our recommendations? The first thing would be, of course, enshrining the rights of older persons in law. That's one big recommendation. And that's a fight that many of the persons in the area, working in the area, have been fighting for a long time. They convinced us, and we did so recommend. The other is this what Tyrone mentioned a while ago, with the system of registration and certification of caregivers, and ensuring that they had working standards in terms of how they cared for older persons and could be certified in doing that. The third is the older person's advocate, somebody who can champion and stand in representation for older persons when they have nobody else or they're afraid to reach out to somebody who has a monitoring capacity and an independent authority. And then the tribunal, a tribunal that can hear disputed cases of a non-criminal nature, that can act as a sort of mediator, arbitrator in matters concerning older persons. And perhaps the last of that would probably be, and I know this is not in any particular order, by the way, would be the question of the recommendations being made to banks to consider reduction in fees to older persons, to consider, the reverse mortgage protocol to allow them to access value, and for their children to have the asset to pay back that mortgage even after they're gone. I would say those are some of the novel and those are the big change items in our recommendations.
Good work, Madam Chairman.
Indeed. This is a tree worth planting.
Yes. Senator Shireen Golding Campbell, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Clayton.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Have a good one, Madam Senator.